From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is the original and weekly podcast about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can check out all our previous episodes, as well as all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. And with me this week is the host of, not the You Run Podcast, but the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast, and his name is Sean. Sean, how the hell are you doing?
Oi, it's the host of the You Run Podcast. That's the really great imitation.
Oh, I'm going to hear shit for you doing that now. That's going to be great.
I don't even know if they say oi over there. Anyways.
Between us offering to record an entire episode with British accents for BP and this, I'm going to start a international incident somehow.
Oi. Well, you know what? It's an exciting podcast because this is the inaugural episode of our second year of the Crummy Movie Marchathon. Crummy Movie March is upon us.
Crummy Movie Marchathon sounds even better.
It's like a Toyota-thon.
And I think we need to sprinkle in a clip of It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year, the Christmas song for this, because Crummy Movie March really does beat the shit out of Christmas, doesn't it?
It does. And there's so much, I mean, arguably, Crummy Movie March is every episode on this show.
Well, I was going to say, it's kind of like Halloween or Christmas for some people. We do celebrate Crummy Movie March pretty much year round.
I mean, it cannot be contained in just 1 month.
This is true.
So Crummy Movie Marchathon, I'm amped. I'm ready to get it off the ground this year. This is our second annual, and we've got some great movies to talk about down in the pike, loaded in the chamber, barreled. I don't know how you would exactly convey that in English words.
Well, before you get your barrels off, what have you been watching this week, if anything?
Well, I got a chance to watch a few pieces of shit. Here, let me tell you. No, most of them have been pretty good. One piece of shit. I watched Mr. Organ, which is a documentary on Netflix. Mr. Organ sounds like it's something to do with bodily parts, right? But it's actually not.
I was thinking either that or pipe organ.
Oh, yeah, that's a good alternative. No, this is about a guy whose name is Organ, Michael Organ. And
I was way off.
This is a documentary on Netflix. It is by journalist David Farrier. And if you've seen Tickled or any of the Dark Tourist stuff on Netflix, this is his thing.
I was going to say, that sounds familiar.
Tickled was a documentary that he made where he uncovered the seedy underbelly of the tickling, it's like the competitive tickling scene, where it's basically like some guy was bankrolling.
This angers me. I don't like this.
Yeah, it was like a homoerotic kind of thing that.
Okay, I'm less angry now, but I still don't like it.
Okay. Anyway, that's tickling. That's a different thing. The Mr. Organ, this is how IMDb, I believe, describes it, or maybe Netflix. David Farrier is drawn into a cat and mouse game with a mysterious individual. Delving deeper, he unearths a trail of court cases, royal bloodlines, and ruined lives in this true story of psychological warfare. Basically, this guy, David Farrier finds out about this guy, Michael Organ. He's running this situation at an antique store that's in New Zealand. David Farrier's from New Zealand. And the guy people will use the parking lot to park at, it's a private parking lot. They're using the parking lot to park in overnight, and they'll go to restaurants or clubs or whatever. And this guy will put a boot on their car and then charge them money to get out of it. So all these people are complaining, and they passed a law in this New Zealand area to kind of combat this thing. And David Farrier starts to go down the rabbit hole of Michael Organ. It's just an interesting documentary where this guy, Michael Organ, is like this gaslighter extraordinaire. So it's creepy in a way, more so than it should be. That's all I'll say about that, because I don't want to spoil it. It's a good documentary. It's creepy enough. It's not like a horror thing. It's not scary, but it's just weird. It's just a weird documentary.
But a documentary that could be creepy without being like a straight up serial killer documentary, which I don't know if this turns into that or not, but
no comment. Yeah. Read the book.
Yeah. But no, a documentary that could pull off creepy is almost like a whole different level of, it's almost like a whole different level of horror, really.
Yeah. And it was good. I really enjoyed it. It's about, I want to say, an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes or whatever. It's a good one to watch on a late night. I also I'm almost finished with it on Hulu, Super Hot, The Spicy World of Pepper People, because I am a spicy food person. And I'm like, oh, maybe I could be into super hot. Maybe I've done some YouTube stuff. I've reviewed some stuff on YouTube. Maybe I could do it with hot peppers. Yeah, no.
Pepper therapy.
Yeah, nope, not into it. But
Scoville therapy.
It's an interesting documentary show about people who are just really into peppers. I thought it was interesting. There's Johnny Scoville, who is like this YouTuber who is a pepper influencer, and he can make or break your pepper. If he says it's one of the hotter peppers, it can launch your brand.
Does he come on and go, what's the show called?
His show, I think it's just Johnny Scoville.
What's
Super Hot?
Hi, I'm Johnny Scoville. Welcome to Super Hot. Proceeds to light his face on fire.
Yeah, he lights his balls on fire. He's like an older dude. He's bald. He's got like a white goatee that he has, like, it's so long he's got it like rubber banded. You know, it's a look. Oh. He wears toe shoes. My younger daughter and I were watching it together. She's infatuated with Vibram 5 Fingers now, the toe shoes. When I showed her, I had a pair. You know, I'm not ashamed to admit I have some Vibram 5 Fingers. She was intrigued. She tried them on. She didn't like it. I also finished season 4 of True Detective. At the time of this recording, the last episode aired yesterday, so got that one.
I gotta get on that.
It's a good season. I still think the first season's the best. I might say season 3 and season 4 are very closely matched, and season 2 is the outlier that's not super great. And the other thing that I watched, I just finished today, is a movie called Hot Times at Montclair High. And it's definitely a crap fest.
Sounds horny.
It's definitely a crap fest. It's a cross between like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Breakfast Club, maybe All the Right Moves. It's an 80s high school coming of age flick without an original bone in its body. It's one of those movies where there's a nerdy character, and the nerdy character, once they take off their glasses, is like a super hot person. In this case, it's a dude. He's just stacked. He's like built, and he shouldn't be. Troy Donahue is the biggest star in the movie, and it also stars, I think you're going to talk about a movie that you watched. One of the guys in the movie, one of the movies you watched was in this movie, so that's the connecting thread there. Just to put it all in perspective.
Is this a movie that you sent me a trailer for?
No, I don't believe. I just kind of decided I was going to watch it today, and I did. This should give you an indication of what this movie, like how great this movie is or isn't. The best scene in the movie is unrelated to anything else. It involves this German guy who is fixing some leak in the high school. And there's an extended scene with him kind of debating this other person who's a secretary with a Spanish accent. It's quippy, and they can't understand each other because of the accent, which is not funny at all. And it ends up with the German guy accidentally lighting a fart on fire, and it burns his face. That is the highlight of this movie, and it comes in the last 10 minutes.
It's a pretty good highlight, though.
Can't go wrong with lighting farts in your face. But yeah, so that's the compendium of what I've watched since the last time we talked.
Well, I don't think I have the same movie that you're thinking that I watched, but I watched, let's see. So before we get into what I watched, I did kind of fall into 2 different rabbit holes on separate podcasts. There are other podcasts than this one, believe it or not.
What?
I know.
I don't believe you.
1 or 2 out there. I fell into podcast music documentary rabbit hole theater, basically. So I got in. I've known about this show, but I rediscovered Disgraceland, which they did a episode about I think it's only one guy, but probably I think he has people that actually work for him with it, but whatever. Anyway, Disgraceland, he has a really good episode about The Clash, which is, and I love The Clash. They're just a great band. And it's one of those things like, you go into, whether it's a podcast or a documentary or whatever, sometimes you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to watch, but you like the subject matter, so you watch it anyway. It's kind of one of those for me. There was a couple things that I didn't know about with it, but a lot of it was like, oh, I've been down part of this road before. I kind of know where I'm at. But if you like deep dives on music in general and some of the darker, I don't want to call it darker side, but some, a lot of musicians and like people in the music industry have some pretty questionable stories or some checkered past type things. A lot of this podcast kind of dives into that, hence the title Disgraceland. So you get some pretty good, like some of your bands that you might hear a lot about. You hear some of the stuff that people don't talk about a lot. So it's cool for that.
Did you end up like screaming at the podcast as you were listening to it? Because I do that a lot. And I'm sure people do it to this show when they're like, God, these guys are fucking idiots.
Not to this podcast, not to these 2 podcasts, okay. But I have to a couple this week.
Okay. As long as it's not just me.
But I'm not going to bring those ones up because that's not Those are like regular listens. The other one I discovered this week, though, that I like is this one was recommended by fellow You Run Podcast Network members, the Krusty Boys,
Oi.
who will, well, they're not British, but sure, so they're not. But anyway,
I know.
they recommended to me the podcast No Dogs in Space, which they do so there's another show called Bandsplain that's it was a Spotify original show, so it's got it's very heavily produced. It has a lot of music drops in it that you're like, how the fuck do they have the licensing rights to play this much music in this episode? And then you realize, oh, they're owned by Spotify. That's probably why. But it's similar to that in that they'll do anywhere from 1 to like 5 episodes in a row, and by each episode is anywhere from an hour to 2 hours long. So these are like really in-depth deep dives on whatever subject. And this podcast does primarily like punk bands, which is way up my alley. Obviously, I started with the Misfits one, but they have a podcast series on like the Slits or Suicide, or they have some other big ones like the Dead Kennedys and the Ramones and stuff like that too. But I was like, I love hearing more. Like anytime you can give me something about the Misfits, especially the Danzig era Misfits, you're going to immediately have my attention. But then if you can follow it up with a really obscure in-depth podcast about a band like the Slits, that you're probably like, who the fuck is this band that you're babbling about? You know, that's the kind of stuff that I find. I mean, it's like any other interest that you might have. You find that weird thing that hits that niche and you're just going to dive in head first. I think there are a couple, but the two who like run this show, they have a really good back and forth. They're pretty funny about it. So if you like deep dives in punk rock history, it's definitely a good podcast to check out. It's not football season now, so I have a lot of time to listen to stuff at work that I'm trying to fill with things that aren't just talk radio, because I don't have enough interest in preseason baseball. I like baseball. I do. I enjoy it, but not enough to get into, you know, who's going to get cut out of training camp on the however many guys are down. Like, I don't need that much.
Just to interrupt that thought, I am going to spring training.
I know you are.
And it's more so just a drink.
I considered going with you, but I have to fucking be responsible or something.
Responsibility is overrated.
I generally agree with that, but well, the listening audience doesn't need to hear my reasons to not be a debaucherous idiot. So not that you're going to be a debaucherous idiot. You're going to be a debaucherous, respectful gentleman, I'm sure.
Of course.
On the TV side, so as of today, I'm one episode back on Curb, because there was one that came out, yesterday?
Yeah.
So I'm 2 out of 3 episodes in, and that is so far shaping up to be right on par with any of the good seasons. I'm sure it's going to have a couple home run episodes that are better, but thankfully I don't think it's going just down the Seinfeld rabbit hole of trying to reshoot the finale, because that's kind of what a lot of people were saying after the first episode. I think it's going to branch past that. Doesn't matter. Larry David's pissed off. Larry David gets mad. I'm amused. That's all I really care about. And then I've fallen pretty hard into the show What We Do in the Shadows. Did I bring this up last week, or did I just tell you this last week?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if you brought it up on the show or not, but I know that you were starting your journey.
Yeah. I'm about 2.5 seasons in now.
Oh, nice.
Which, that's not as bad as it sounds, because it's
another short.
Cable run. Yeah, it's short, and it's a cable run show. So it's like 10, 12 episodes, something like that a season. But I'm finding myself really enjoying Colin the energy vampire, more than anything else on the show. And the more they evolve that character and kind of let him have a little bit more rope, but keep him reined in it. The show is basically Parks and Rec, but vampires. That's essentially what the show is, but they do it really well. And adding the extra bit of, it's on FX, so they can drop F-bombs and say shit and make straight up dick jokes, and they don't even have to beat around the bush. Yeah, fun. They can just be like, here's a cock. So that show's been, I'm starting to wonder if it's going to wear thin, because I think there's 5 seasons to get through. But so far, I've been pretty happy watching that, or it's been a very good, short, easily digestible thing to kind of power through.
Yeah. I think that's one of those shows that anybody can probably sit down and watch, and you don't have to be into vampires. It's just kind of, it's funny, it's light, it's not super heavy and not super dark, but it makes fun of itself. It
does, but it helps if you have at least a working knowledge, if not appreciation, of generic vampire lore, because I like the jokes they pull in that are either, this isn't how they say it, but it's essentially that was just in a movie. That's not vampire lore. That's just bullshit. Or the opposite, where it's something totally random. We're like, well, this is vampire lore and not bullshit, and it does affect us. Those or werewolf lore or whatever other creature happens to show up on any given week. I think that's all really well played. And I like that you don't necessarily have to watch, like, I'm watching these shows in order because that's how they play on Hulu. But I like that from what I've seen so far, the feeling I get is you could pick up any episode on any given time. And one, you don't necessarily need its predecessor to appreciate what's going on in this episode, at least for the most part. I'm sure there's probably one or two-part episodes that I haven't got to yet, but I like that it's not linear. What would that be? Just episodic. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, not serial, but yeah.
So, which I feel like not a lot of shows do that now. Like, I feel like almost every show you almost have to have last week's episode to know what the hell's going on this week, which is why I fall off on a lot of shows.
Yeah, very reliant on you watching on a consistent basis.
Right. So, and I like, again, so far that none of that's been a thing. And then on the movie side, so I'm curious what movie you thought I watched, because the only movie I watched this week was one that you sent me a trailer of. It's called Hard to Die.
Oh, okay. I thought you had watched Leprechaun in space.
Oh, that was last week.
Oh, shit.
I already talked about that.
Damn it.
I mean, I could watch it again if you want. So put it on right now. TV's right over there.
All right, let's end the podcast early. Time for Leprechaun 4.
We'll just talk over it. You know what? There'd be less weird things if we just stopped to talk about a space horror movie. Anyway, Hard to Die. So, you know what's a sign of a really great movie?
Jim Wynorski.
Well, that too, but you know what else is a great sign in a movie?
Boobs.
Yeah, that's surprisingly for an NC-17. There's not as much as I would have expected. I really like when a movie takes a good 20-minute segue to show a clip show from a whole different movie.
Oh,
and
no
just kind of
shit,
talk
really?
over it like, yes, and a
Oh.
very recognizable movie to me, I'm sure for you as well, because even if you haven't seen this movie, I know you know who the Driller Killer is.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess I didn't research this yet because we're not doing an episode on this yet. I feel like this is only a matter of time based off my research, but I guess this is a extremely loose follow-up that is supposed to take place between Slumber Party Massacre, Sorority House Massacre, Sorority House Massacre 2, but before Slumber Party Massacre 2, which I didn't know that Sorority House and Slumber Party
Were related?
Massacres. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No.
I'm not totally shocked, but there's a segment in the movie where a guy's explaining shit to these like half naked women, and it literally turns into like a 15-20 minute clip show from Slumber Party Massacre. I'm like, I mean, I like Slumber Party Massacre, so I'm not mad about this, but the movie's only like an hour and 20 minutes to begin with.
So it's on par with something like Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where they reuse a bunch of the movie from a bunch of clips from the previous movie and just kind of narrate over them to tell you a story?
A little bit.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 is very much so like the first half of the movie is telling you what happened in the first movie, and the second half of the movie is this, garbage day. This one is more like we get like 10 to 15 minutes of leading up to that, and then we have this interlude of here's what happened in this whole other fucking movie that you didn't know was related to it. And then essentially the rest of the movie is a lot of girls running around in lingerie with assault rifles. Not a bad thing.
No.
Again, it's NC-17 rated, and I don't feel like it really earned an NC-17. It kind of feels like an NC-17 where they were like, we don't know what to do with this piece of shit, so we're going to call it NC-17. I've seen more, because when I hear NC-17, I generally think nudity. Like, I don't think violence for that.
Yeah, borderline porno or something.
Yeah, and I've seen way more, frankly, pornographic like movies in R-rated movies that we've talked about on this show. Black Devil Doll from Hell has more pornographic scenes in it than this does, to me.
Take a drink. Made another appearance on the show.
It's Crummy Movie March. It's going to happen.
Throwback to last year's Crummy Movie March.
But my point is, there's more gratuitous nudity in that movie than there is, which that's probably not rated either. I can't imagine that went before the rating board. But
that would cost money.
Yeah, maybe that's why this is NC-17 instead of not. I don't know. But I don't know where other people can find this, but if you can, it's a fun watch, and it's worth kind of the weird segue for something that is kind of mindless and kind of, it's like somewhere between Die Hard and Slumber Party Massacre, apparently.
Doesn't show up on Just Watch, so maybe we'll try and find a link somewhere that you can watch it.
That might be because it's NC-17.
We'll figure it out.
I don't know if they put smut on there, or at least not legitimate smut.
Right.
Damn shame. But yeah, and if we can't figure it out, then you'll just have to tell us that you can't figure it out in the responses on the show, because that would be good too. Call us liars. Call us out on it, right?
Yeah. Why the hell not? Nobody's infallible. Everyone's accountable. God damn it.
So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back, and we are going to talk about this week's title, Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. Hey, Sean, how are you today?
Horrible. I've got the mumps.
You got the mumps. You know what would cheer you up when you have the mumps?
Liquor.
Liquor also works, but I was thinking you could listen to a great comedy podcast like You Can Eat That Crust. It's available on the You Run Podcast Network, and it's a podcast that features all kinds of great topics like movies, animal attacks, video games, some new, some old, and movies and all kinds of other stuff. They kind of go all over the map. Have you heard about this podcast?
I think I'm too sick for that.
Well, I disagree with you, but you should check them out anyway, because they're on the You Run Podcast Network and available for you to listen to right now. We're back, and as promised, we are going to talk about Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. This movie stars Pauly Shore and a bunch of other fuckers. This is pre-Weasel Pauly Shore, but he's really enough said. I'm pretty sure this is Pauly Shore's first appearance on the show, isn't it?
You know, it might be.
We've talked about him before, but I don't think we've had another movie of his.
We've talked about him. I have a whole thing about the cast that I want to get into. So let's do the normal stuff, and then we're going to die. I got a whole litany of things to talk about with the cast.
Here we go. Crummy Movie March means Sean actually tries. So
that's all right. This is the only time of year that I actually try.
All right. So we start with a third-party review, and this week our third-party review is right off the gun. It's Nina E. First review that is on Rotten Tomatoes. And she gives this movie 4 stars. Her review? Most of the reviews here are cheesier than the damn movie, and that's saying a lot. End review.
What is is Rotten Tomatoes, refresh my memory on the freshness? Is that 4 out of 5?
It's out of 5.
Okay.
4 out of 5.
That's, wow, very respectable. Very respectable.
Especially since she didn't say a damn thing about the movie.
True, very true. Perfect. Perfect
all right, John,
review.
Tell us about this crummy movie masterpiece.
All right, so we head over to IMDb. We look at the storyline. We look at the plot. First, we're going to look at the plot, I guess. How many times have I read this? A lot, and I can never keep it straight. I guess the plot's at the top here, underneath the poster and all that
They
shit.
used to label them. They don't label them anymore.
They labeled the storyline. That's why it always confuses me. Anyways, it says, a man loses his home and suffers life-threatening burns from a fire deliberately set by commercial real estate developers vying for his property. 1 year later, a shopping mall opens on the land, and a series of murders begins. A series of murders begins. That doesn't sound like it's conjugated correctly. Anyways, we'll go down to the storyline. Care of Stickman_2 at tripod.net. He says, or she says, well, Stickman.
Wait, at tripod.net? That's a domain?
Well, it used to be.
Anyway.
It used to be in the 40s. This one says, a guy called, he must be English. Because it says a guy called.
Oh, we got to read it. You're already pissing off the entire country of England.
Oh,
go ahead and read it in your You Run podcast accent.
Okay. A guy called Eric owns a huge house and some greedy people want to build a mall over it. So they get someone to burn down his house. Eric is badly burned, but not dead. And a year later, the mall opens. What they don't realize is that Eric is living underneath the mall and he's very angry. Exclamation point. He is very angry. God damn it. Very angry.
We don't always bring this up, but sometimes they're worth bringing up. The immediate tag words for this movie: nudity, teen slasher, crossbow, thrown off building.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, very true. I didn't even notice that. And the movie starts out, oddly enough, when I started the movie, I've seen this movie a few times, but it's been a while, and I had to start it again. Like, I had to find a different thing online. We'll just put it that way. I had to find a different thing online because the way the movie starts, it's just like the movie starts. There's no title. There's no fade from black. It's just like,
spoiler, I kind of feel like that's how the movie ends too.
There's an HVAC vent that falls off the wall. A guy climbs out in darkness because this movie is way dark. And I'm not talking dark as in content. I'm talking dark as in visually dark, as in you cannot see.
It's like they lit the set with a mag light.
Or like a lighter.
Yeah.
Hey, we got my phone. We got this has a flashlight on it. This has a torch for all our English listeners. This has a torch. Let's turn on the torch so we can see what's going on here.
Oh, we're gonna get so roasted for talking shit about art.
Come on, we're not talking shit. We're using common parlance.
What's the bunch of coont Americans? I just went a little Conor McGregor there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's more Irish. Hey, I'm American. I don't have any room to talk about any kind of accent. But so the movie starts
We all
out.
sound like garbage.
Yeah,
It's
we
fine.
sound like trash people. The movie starts out with the Phantom, aka Eric, going into a sporting good store, and it's a low budget sporting good store because they don't have ARs or pistols. He steals a crossbow, and the crossbow he uses a crossbow to good effect.
They do have a flamethrower in the mall apparently, but no
Getting ahead of
guns,
ourselves
so
here. So I want to jump into the cast, if you will indulge me.
Please do.
Okay. So this is what I have written down. Eric Rydell, he is Eric, the titular Eric, and I needed to use titular at some point. So I'm using it now. It's my one usage of titular.
Do you think that his name's Eric because it sounded similar to Derek and they could just kind of like work around that easily enough?
Yeah, maybe, because
if his name was Frank or something, do you think he'd be constantly like, damn it, Frank? And he'd be like, just sitting there with his fucked up mask on?
Frank's Revenge or something. They couldn't stray too far. But Derek Rydell, this is arguably his big break. His previous roles were stuff like Kid with Long Hair in Death Wish 4. And he played Billy Colton in Night Visitor, which is a movie where he plays a character who witnesses a satanic murder of a hooker. So that he sounds like he may have an interesting back catalog.
What's this movie called?
Night Visitor. He went on to star after this.
Go ahead and jot that down.
This was the height of his career, I would say, because after this, he starred in an ABC after-school special called A Question About Sex, and he was in Popcorn. He bought a bag and went home in a box. So anyways, other cast members include Morgan Fairchild as the town mayor, who's really excited about this town, Midwood, getting a mall. We have Rob Estes, because this is Crummy Movie March. Rob Estes is going to be showing up in another entry this month, but we'll get into that later this month. And as you mentioned, Pauly Shore in an early role as Buzz. We've got
Weasel.
Yep, pre-Weasel. What he has a prototypical proto-Weasel little section of this movie.
Yeah, but he's not full
No,
Pauly
he's
Shore-isms.
not
Like, there's
stuttering.
not one time where he says, buddy.
Easel?
Yeah.
Ken Foree, of course. And I thought this one was interesting. We've got Jonathan Goldsmith, which you might not recognize that name, but you may know him as the most interesting man in the world for Dos Equis. He is in this movie in a big role, but he is absolutely unrecognizable as that character, like as the most interesting man in the world and who he is here. I had to look it up
because I didn't know that till you just said it.
There you go. I didn't know that that guy's name was Jonathan Goldsmith, and I did not remember that he was the most interesting man in the world because he looks nothing like the person in this movie. And there's one other thing.
He does in his IMDb picture.
Oh, yeah, because they use the new one. But Rob Estes in this movie, there's a scene very early where Melody, who is the love interest, let me just kind of get into the plot more so than a little bit more in depth than IMDb says. So this is basically.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may, please.
So before Sean explains the plot, you have to keep in mind that whatever he's about to say, splice in like 2 to 3 minutes of the same boring missionary sex scene every 5 minutes into whatever the story is. So if he gives you about a premise that's like an hour and a half long, this same boring missionary sex scene needs to be replayed with slightly different lighting every 10 to 15 minutes. Fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. But I do want to talk about that sex scene too, because I had some complaints about it. But anyways,
I had plenty of complaints about it, but I digress.
The plot. We're going to get a little bit deeper dive on the plot. Basically, I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell, and I'm going to leave it a little spoilery. I'm not going to spoil the movie because I think that everybody listening should go out and watch it. But this is about a developer who is working to get Eric's family moved off of some land because they want to build this mall on it. And to get rid of them, they light Eric's house on fire. His parents are killed. Eric is killed, but is he? He isn't, because this is called Eric's Revenge. The mall is built. It opens. Suddenly people are dying. Stuff gets stolen. It seems like it all revolves around Eric's girlfriend, Melody, and the people she gets involved with. The people that get involved with her get hurt.
Aside from all the gym equipment that he steals, because he's got to get bricked up.
He steals some shit.
Yeah.
So Eric lives in the mall now after his house. This is not part of my plot summary, but after the mall gets built, he lives, I guess, under the mall. Is that what you are understanding?
Yeah, it's like
it's almost like a storage room.
This is, I don't know if this is a thing out of our state, because I've always heard to referred to as a Michigan basement, but it's like a Michigan basement, but under a mall. Which what I mean by
and
that,
it's a dirt floor.
Exactly, which is a Michigan basement. So you've not heard that term before?
I've heard that term before, but I thought basements were more prevalent like in this area because of whatever.
I've always heard So I guess for Sean as well, I've always heard the term Michigan basement referred to as a basement, but it's primarily a dirt floor. And that's kind of what this is, I mean, I think we're led to or implied that there's some sort of like tunnel system or some type of shit where he can kind of maneuver around the mall.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like there's basically it's almost like a bat cave, but a really shitty bat cave that happens to be under a mall and has access to the outside mall through like the heating system or something. The
HVAC and everything.
The HVAC system. Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, dirt floor. He's got cool stuff that he's stolen from around the mall. And right off the bat, Eric gets his way by killing a maintenance worker by smushing smushing his face into a fan in the HVAC system, which this guy didn't do anything. Well, he killed the security guard too at the very beginning, like before the credits. But this is all about anytime anybody gets close to Melody.
Complicit.
That's true. Just by working at the mall, anytime anybody gets close to Melody, Eric's going to take him out because, you know, he loves her. He does everything he can and puts orkins, as Rob Estes would say. It's orchids, but Rob Estes at the beginning of this movie said, somebody put orkins, like the Orkin Man, like the exterminator.
Popped her chair and he doesn't want someone to froth his cream. I just broke the show.
I was going to say, I think I'm having a malfunction here. This is the same mall as Chopping Mall, the same mall as Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the same mall as Terminator 2.
Galleria.
This is the Sherman Oaks Galleria. Very good.
Yep.
You did your homework.
No, I just recognize this mall because it's in every movie from 1982 to roughly 1991.
Anything with a mall in it.
Yeah. Very open to shooting, which I'm actually kind of impressed that I say that they were able to get this mall because I feel like you would need to have some level of a budget to be able to shoot in this mall. I'm like, I know that we've seen a bunch of movies that we've talked about them in now multiple episodes, but you know, we've done this will be our third episode based off a movie that's takes place or at least has a scene in this mall.
Mm-hmm.
Did Raw Deal go in this mall?
No, I don't think so.
No. So this is our third movie that's had actually taken place in this, or third episode. But anyway, I feel like you would need to be able to give them at least like a couple grand a night to shoot in this mall. And I'm kind of surprised this movie had the budget to shoot in a mall. Like I would have expected them to be in a dirt mall, like a flea market that happened to have doors in places. I went to the flea market on Saturday. I'm not saying it as a knock on flea markets. I'm saying as a knock on the budget of this film.
I mean, I don't give a shit about a flea market, but I was going to say, hey, they got Morgan Fairchild for this movie. Excuse me.
That's true.
They had some dollars. I mean, you know,
they got the weasel,
star quality, like Pauly Shore.
They bankrolled Pauly Shore.
Morgan Fairchild. Just to give you an idea, though, this is filmed in the Galleria, but the representation of this mall is so skeevy that the dressing rooms don't have doors on them. They allow women to take their shirts and bras off, even if they're just trying on skirts. They have cameras in the dressing room. I think depictions like this have really scared and scarred me from using dressing rooms because I'm afraid that they have cameras in them and they're going to be watching me because I have the body of an Adonis and they clearly want to see what I'm doing. And the other thing is that the architects and whoever set up the security system in this movie or for this mall is a goddamn genius because Eric uses the mall security system to also monitor what Melody's doing. And it always has a perfect angle to see what she's doing. Great microphone so you can pick up on her conversation. I mean, genius. I want to hire this guy.
One's wearing a microphone.
I'm going to hire this guy for my mall when I build a mall.
I want to say, there goes, talk about throwing some money down the drain. I have the exact opposite problem with changing or fitting rooms. I always want to go and take all my clothes off and leave the fitting room with the door open, and they're always telling me, no sir, you have to stay in. Why are you taking your pants off to try on that shirt? You know, stupid questions I don't understand why I need to answer.
I agree. I think you
country of freedom.
Is this even America? Clearly not.
Oi. I'm moving to fucking England.
Oi.
I think that's Australian, but whatever.
Hey,
close enough.
It all sounds the same to me. I'm a dumb American.
It's only a different continent. Whatever.
Hey, they're like descendants of the same people, aren't they? Prisoners and shit.
Aside from Eric essentially seeking revenge for questionable reasons, or not questionable, I guess his motives are pretty strong. But what else happens in this?
A lot of people, well, about 6 or 7 people get killed. Rob Estes is a news reporter, and he's covering the opening of this mall, grand opening of this mall, and he is there to take pictures, but he starts to develop this relationship with Melody, who is Eric's ex-girlfriend or girlfriend, and they're not really even broken up because she thinks he's dead. I have a big complaint about this movie, and the way that Eric is portrayed. So this movie is very much like Phantom of the Mall. Phantom of the Mall. Shit, that's what this movie's called. It's very much like Phantom of the Opera because Eric wears over half his face. He wears this.
It's like a weird parody of Phantom of the Opera. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a trope of Phantom of the Opera, but he wears a half mask over his face because his face is all burnt. He doesn't talk through most of the movie.
I did make a note. I want to read it. Making the Phantom of the Mall mask is not nearly as intense as making the Freddy Krueger glove because it's very much so shot this hypercut clip of he's going to show this. It looks like a grinder, but it's really small. It's something
like a Dremel
for like pottery. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Like carving away the mask and shit that he basically just busted a mannequin and like carved this mask out of it. I was like, I mean, and again, there's like fire backdrop and shit. I don't know where his fireplace is and his dirt layer under the wall, but apparently he had one. And yeah, I was like, I feel like this is very much so going for the Nightmare on Elm Street vibe because I've been vocal on social media, at least. I don't know if I've said a lot on here. Freddy is not my favorite slasher. He's not even close. But that first movie, the scene where he's the opening credit scene with the old school New Line, which they need to bring that logo back, but I digress. That's a very well done, like, I don't know what's going to happen here, but this is going to be kind of fucked up and I'm kind of unsettled by whatever's happening on this screen.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they were trying to copy that.
Yeah, like ape it a little bit.
Right. But I don't feel like it was effective.
Yeah, I mean, it's very brief. It's like that's all the character building for Eric essentially is he gets burned.
Oh yeah.
And he makes his mask and he knows kung fu. He like trained himself like in kung fu or some shit in the meantime.
Yeah, he's like Conor McGregor, but in the basement of a mall and burned.
And without a whiskey and poor.
Well, we just don't see the whiskey.
True. He could be stealing that. I think that,
yeah,
you know, this whole thing where the developer, his son's a shithead, he's a little shitbag and he runs around the mall like he owns the place and he meets a, not, I would say untimely, except it's a deserved demise. His death basically taught me that if I ever see an abandoned skateboard just sitting around, just leave it alone. Because he finds a skateboard in the middle of the mall, he gets on, he does some tricks, he does some, you know, whatever, some 360s or whatever. And Eric's at the top of the escalator with a lasso as if he's a cowboy, and he ropes him in one try around the neck, and he sticks the rope in an escalator, and the escalator comes up, drags him up, and just strangles him. Fucking ruthless.
As a fan of this era of Kevin Smith, I'm sitting here watching that, and I'm just thinking of Brody screaming, that kid is back on the escalator again.
Absolutely. This was the kid grown up, maybe, in reverse time.
I like that scene because it gives justification to Brody's being pissed about escalators.
Yeah, I want to lose a finger.
When I was watching this and you're seeing him go up the escalator in this lasso noose thing, I was expecting a much more gnarly death than what we got.
Yeah, turning to mush or something in the grinder.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like that's one of the... I thought they were going to turn to like human jerky, basically, like mush, goop, all the shit, like a mess. And I feel like that's one of the spots where the budget in this movie shows, because I would assume, because this is clearly a movie that's made by people who have like a soft spot for horror movies and shitty horror movies at that. So these are our people. I feel like any person who's making this kind of movie probably would want to crank that up and make it as gnarly and nasty as possible, because that's what your people do, right? And it feels like one of those spots where they got to the top of the elevator and you get the unpleasant, you know, and so on.
No mush.
It just kind of stops the escalator, which is probably more realistic as to what would happen. I don't think the escalator is really going to turn you into fucking ground beef, but probably. But as a, you know, Crummy movie March aficionado, I was hoping for some gunk, and we didn't really get a whole lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at slaughterhouses, they use escalators. They just throw a big side of beef on it. Yeah, and they just grind it up.
They just put the cows on the escalator and just,
when it gets to the top,
spins through.
Sorry, Charlie.
You're fucked.
It's all over.
Whoa.
So we get to the mystery. The mystery is like, they flash back to it, and you alluded to it earlier. They flash back to like who was responsible for Eric like being burned and killed, and we find out it's the security guard Volker, who is played by a guy who is like one of my favorite dudes. His name is Gregory Scott Cummins. He is in a movie called Hack-A-Lantern that we need to talk about around Halloween this year. It's a unbelievably...
Oh, shit. He's Mac's dad. That's where I recognize him from. He's Mac's dad from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Is he really in It's Always Sunny?
Yeah, he plays.
no
So
shit.
he's not like in every episode,
Mhm.
but he's so Mac's dad. I don't know if they ever say it or not, but he's essentially like a Chicano gangbanger who's in and out of prison through the show. And Mac is always trying to have this meaningful father-son relationship, and he's always not. And it's works comically as you would expect. Okay, I just went on his IMDb and it pops up with a picture of Max. Okay, anyway, I'm interrupting.
Gregory
and
Scott Cummins.
I'm
Great
totally
guy.
derailing this show because I love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's one of its top 5 shows all time for me, so I'm really happy to see this now.
Well,
anyway,
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad that you interluded with that piece of information. Sincerely. So Volker,
sad thing is, I bet you more people know that him as Mac's dad that just heard me go off like that.
for sure. Then I've heard of this movie
Anything else?
or Hack-O-Lantern, another masterpiece, and that's a
For
fucking crime against humanity. Anyways, back to the movie.
Just ask the comedian
Yeah, exactly. So, we won't get into that right now. So
right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's for Hack-O-Lantern. You'll have to wait for that. That's what we call a tease. So Volker he's responsible for Eric's house being burned down. He's like a hitman or like a cleaner, basically. He's taking care of Eric. But this gets revealed that Eric gets burned and all this stuff in this sex scene that we were talking about earlier during the plot, or during whatever that fucking thing was called. And this scene, these are high schoolers. Like, these are people in, I don't know, they might be like right before college, or they may be seniors in high school. That's kind of like how they're portrayed. The scene is in some like log cabin or some shit. There's a fire. They're in like silk bedding, and all they're unbelievable. Eric, the guy, Derek
You see the
Rydell.
scene like 20 times through the movie.
I think that's an exaggeration, but you do see it multiple times. You do see it multiple times, and this guy is like ripped. He's supposed to be a teenager, and he's ripped. I'm sorry, I was a teenager at one time. Not ripped, never ripped. The only thing ripped are my underpants.
No,
When I bent
I
over
was
too
shaped
quickly,
like
my
a bowling
skids,
pin.
a pair.
My boobs hadn't come in yet, but my beer belly was still kind of like, yeah, you don't drink much because you're underage, but here we go. We're
Gonna start you in the right direction, and this
Yeah.
is it. Outward.
those English genes that I have.
Oi. All comes
Oi.
back to oi. So yeah, we have Volker. We get that whole thing. Estes. The thing that Melody remembers about this guy that burnt Eric's house down is he had a earring, and Volker has the same earring. So I like the scene where Estes has his camera, and he's trying to get a picture of Volker's earring without letting him know he's taking his picture. So he kind of uses one of those round mirrors, and they're in a Sam Goody store, which is great.
Is this the
shoot from the hip.
belt buckle one?
Yeah. He shoots down at his waist at the round mirror, somehow gets Volker in the picture without looking
In
through the
focus.
viewfinder. Well, he's not really in
Somehow.
focus but I think this was great. If this was a movie today, he has a sit down conversation with Melody, the love interest, and he's talking. He's like, I think I found your guy. He's a security guard that works here. I have the picture. It's on my camera. And if it was now, he could just show her the picture. But he's like, I have to go develop this, and in about 6 or 8 weeks, I'll have the print back for you, and I can show you that this is the guy.
But also, if this was now, there would be a running joke in the movie about him having the middle-aged dad like cell phone holster.
Yeah.
And that would be a running joke through the entire movie. Forget the fact that malls are barely a thing anymore. That would be a running joke, is just the cell phone holster and him using it that way.
I think the movie unfolds from there. We get Volker, and there's people get killed. There's one of my favorite kills. Everybody that gets killed in the movie does relate back to this Eric's revenge thing. And there is a scene, the guy playing in the mall, in the food court or whatever, playing the piano. He's a guy that, like, I don't know, he had a part in killing or trying to kill Eric or burning his house down or whatever. He comes to his untimely demise because he goes to take a shit, and he's sitting on the toilet, and that's when the cobra, like, Eric has a snake, and somehow he feeds the cobra up through the toilet to bite his dick.
I wasn't sure. Maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. I was like, where'd the cobra come from? But
The toilet.
I like that you just filled that in.
Yeah, there
for
you
me,
go.
So
And he tries to use that same cobra to take out Rob Estes later in the movie.
So I also like the piano guy. One, he's a dirtbag, like, as a human being in the movie. Not the actor, just the character that he's portraying.
No,
as a
the actor's,
dirtbag.
I've heard he's a big piece of shit too.
Is he? Okay, I don't even
I don't even know who he is.
Okay. But so what I like about him is he's playing piano in the mall and he's like being a total, dirtbag to random girls that walk by. But what makes me laugh about him is I don't know if Menards is a nationwide chain, but Menards, if you don't have Menards in your local area, Menards is basically a giant hardware store. It's like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and it's the one that I happen to go to because it's close to my house. And I like Menards because their employees are available, but if you don't need anything, they leave you the fuck alone. I like that. Unlike Home Depot, that like every person in an orange shirt that walks by you wants to ask you if you need anything. I'm like, no, leave me the fuck alone. Anyway, for whatever reason, the Menards that I go to on the weekends, they always have one of two people that's playing piano there. There's like a big player piano that's at the top of the escalators because this is a 2-floor store. And there's the one of two people. There's either the very depressed looking guy who looks like, I learned how to play piano. I wanted to be in like the Philharmonic Orchestra or some shit, but here I am on Saturday playing piano at Menards for probably $5 an hour. Or the polar opposite, which is some middle-aged, probably mid 50s woman, like age wise, super happy, upbeat, bubbly, like plugging along, playing the shit out of that piano every Saturday that I go in there. I'm like, either one. They both kind of, because I think they're told you have to greet people when they come up the escalator, and I always need stuff on the second floor. So they're always like, hey, how you doing? Do as they go on and do their shit.
One is before drugs and one is after drugs.
Yeah. So now I haven't been there this week, for better or worse, but now every time that I'm going to go up there, I'm like, you're just one step up from that fucker in Phantom of the Mall that got his dick bit by a cobra and got shot in the chest with an arrow and continued to go to work anyway.
That arrow shot could have gone very wrong. Eric is very irresponsible with the crossbow because he shoots the guy in the shoulder. And if any weird move by Melody in the parking lot, the guy who gets shot with the crossbow is assaulting Melody for whatever reason. And Eric takes a shot with the crossbow. Any wrong move.
He hits on her first. So if you hit on her, that's by what year is this? 1986, 87?
89, I believe.
89?
1989.
Okay, well, that's still 80s. By 1989 standards, if you hit on a girl in the mall while you're playing piano, you're legally
required,
not only allowed to, but encouraged to pick her up, quote, quote, in the parking lot by any means necessary. And Eric's just being a modern vigilante.
Okay. If you say so.
I don't know if we're going to, at this rate, I don't know if we're going to survive March between our picking a fight with England and whatever I just said.
Hey, it's all about the toilet cobra.
Should be a new phrase for the show.
I just like that this movie has it has basically about 7 or 8 different kills. And one of my favorite kills in this movie is one of my favorite movie kills of all time. And it was almost going to be a question of the week. It's at the end of the movie, we find out, spoiler alert. So anybody that's listening that really wants to watch this movie that's 35 years old at this point, spoiler alert, Morgan Fairchild, the mayor, had a part in having Eric taken out and his family taken out because she is a stakeholder, a stockholder. She has some kind of
really a spoiler. I mean, they don't tell you till the end. They basically tell you in the first 5 minutes.
All these people are trash. All the adults are trash. And she says, hey, I had a part in him getting taken out. And the scene where they're discussing it, Eric, just because he crawls through the HVAC, that's how he teleports himself, much like Jason Voorhees through underground tunnels, as is canon. Eric falls out of your face. I like the look that you're giving me.
I mean, the sad thing is you're actually right.
I know.
But I'm in my head, I'm like, does he know he's right? Because I know you haven't seen all those movies.
Oh, I know. I know this.
Okay. Anyway.
Eric falls feet first through the vent, grabs Morgan Fairchild in like a Ultimate Warrior power slam, like a gorilla press kind of thing, and puts her a header through the window, and she falls like 3 stories to be impaled on a scale model of the mall. And this is like the grand opening. There's all these people all dressed up and shit, and like tuxes and like sequin gowns and shit, and they start screaming.
You've seen Hot Fuzz, right?
Not all of it.
Have you seen the end of it?
No.
Okay. Can I spoil it?
Sure.
So spoilers for those of you who are not Sean's stuck with it anyway.
Oi.
If you haven't seen the end of Hot Fuzz, there's a scene very much so like this, and that they go in Hot Fuzz, they have Sanford, which is the perfect village or whatever. There's a miniature version of Sanford in there, and they very much so throw the big bad through, I don't remember, it's like a church or some sharp building they throw him through it at the end of that movie. So, which that's a movie that we should talk about too, because I really love that movie. But anyway, so spoiler, back to the movie that we're talking about.
Yes.
Spoiling.
Eric has planted a bomb under the mall, has the fastest counter in history. It had like 30 minutes on it. And as the movie progresses in 5 minutes of movie time, it's down to 3 seconds. And they're just driving out of the mall and it explodes. And we don't know.
I love that you see Pauly Shore on like a mall golf cart, like, whoa, buddy.
No, it was like a Honda deal, but had a
It's
sidecar.
so funny. It's bad.
But he
Either
drives
way.
it out of the mall and nobody looks at him at all. They're just
Yeah.
like, oh shit, this kid, fuck. That somebody like actually turns around to look and watch him go away, but nobody's like, hey, stop that kid. He's stealing that motorcycle. No.
Stop, buddy.
Stop wheezing the jet. And this is where the propane tank with the hardware store with the blowtorch that we have no clue where it comes from.
Yeah. So again, we're both children of the 80s and 90s, respectively. I remember seeing guns in malls for purchase, not for use.
Not for pleasure.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've ever seen a flamethrower in person, period, let alone in a mall. Maybe at like some sort of like monster truck rally or
Gibraltar
something,
Trade
but not
Center.
that I really
I've seen a lot of guns and knives and shit. And when they had the gun and knife show.
Yeah, I have too,
But not in a
but
mall.
I don't remember. And I went to a gun and knife show right after COVID just because I wanted to get out of the house. And I had a buddy. I was like, neither of us do this, but
You want to go
like,
hoard ammo with
you want
me?
to leave the house? Well, no, we were just like, we just want to get out. Like, I think we all had that moment, like at the end of all that stuff, we're like, I don't care. Just let me out of this house. So we went to a gun and knife show and it was a experience. I don't remember a flamethrower there. Maybe I just didn't talk to the right guy, but
No, guy.
I feel like if I found a flamethrower, I would have taken my phone out and be like,
Saving that one for later. Before we
Right.
get to hot dogs, I want to pose an alternate theory of what actually happens in this movie. Are you game for that?
sure. But before we get to that, actually, you know what? Go to that. I'll just throw it in my hot dog part. So
Before you get to that, let me get to this. We should have just kept going on and getting like before you get to that, and we could have had so many things like loaded up in a queue that we would not have
we
any
already
idea.
fucked it up. Go ahead.
Okay. So anyways, this movie really, if you think about it, the movie really follows and Eric is the bad guy, right? It's Eric's revenge and he's the bad guy. Oh, what a shithead. He's so jealous and yada, yada, yada. Melody, blah. He's killing all these people and whatever. But I have an alternate take. And my alternate take is that the whole movie, Melody is really pining after Eric and saying how much she misses him and how much she loved him. And it was really a tragedy that he died this way and his house got burnt up. When Eric reveals himself to still be alive to Melody, he's all burnt up. And once Melody sees how gross and disturbing he is, she doesn't want to be with him anymore. She wants to be with Rob Estes.
Okay, I picked up on that too, and I was watching. I'm like, so you do not want him because his dick's all burned up, or do you not want him because of this reporter guy that you're
Only
trying
half
to
of his
bang?
dick is probably all burnt up. Let's just face it.
Yeah, well, let's be fair. If you have,
He's got like a hot dog with a crispy skin, like when you burned it, when you char it too much, and the other side's fine.
I almost opened a door that I don't need to open.
But I think he has every right to be pissed off at her. She's dreaming about him. She's having these dreams about having sex with him and all this stuff. But when she finds out he's gross, then he couldn't control it. It's not like he wanted to be gross. Now that he's gross, clearly all his fault. Eric's a psychopath. He's killing all these people. I just think it's kind of bullshit.
Eric was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And you know who's playing for that? Eric.
That's right. It's his fault he got burnt to a crisp. So do you want that? That's what I wanted to get to.
Okay. Well, I feel like we've talked a lot about this movie and not a lot about this movie at the same time, but that's fine. Like, we don't have to be thorough.
It's Crummy Movie March. That's what we do here.
Yeah. It's Crummy Movie Podcast, Mark, whatever. So, Crummy Podcast, you want me to start on hot dogs? You want to kick us off?
Then you're
I mean,
for
this
big
is kind
treat,
of
bro, because it's hot dog time.
Oh shit, we're interrupted. I should start just interrupting us with that. It's hot dog time. Yes, please regale us with your hot dogs.
You want me to
Yes,
go first?
please.
Okay. So this movie is fun. That's just, if you were going to put a single word review on it, the word is fun. Now, if you go a little bit past that, you're going to see warts and half-burned dicks and the same boobs in missionary position over and over again. Like you, I have the same fascination and love for this kind of movie. This is a movie that I feel like had aspirations to be some big thing and fell short for a plethora of reasons. That said, this is not my rating, but if I were going to say just the movie alone, like baseline movie alone, I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 10. Here's where it gets extra points. You get a half an extra point because you have Ken Foray. Now I'm going to add Gregory Scott Cummins and Pauly Shore in this movie. So we're up to 6.5. You get a half a point for each of those guys. And then you add the fact that once this movie ends, all of a sudden my ears are treated with the docile and happy tones of the band The Vandals, which, going back to the beginning of this episode, I grew up a punk rock kid, so I very much so have a love for The Vandals, which is a 80s, 90s SoCal punk band, which if you're into that type of shit, you're going to know exactly who I'm talking about. If you're not, whatever. That right there gives it another point. So this movie, shockingly to me, has, between just the people in this movie, I'd almost give it half a point for the fucking Dos Equis guy being in here, but I didn't recognize him. If he was still doing the Dos Equis, shtick, you get a half point. I'm going to give this movie a whopping 7.5 half-burned dick hot dogs out of 10 hot dogs, because you got the Vandals, you've got Mac's dad, you got Pauly Shore, the Weasel, you got Ken Foray, you got a bunch of random fucking kills, and you essentially have like CrossFit, Taibo, MMA, Karate Kid, Phantom of the Opera shit going on in Dirt Basement, where he occasionally comes up and kills some people, mixed in with bad sex scenes for an hour and a half. Is this movie good? Yeah, kind of. It's fun. It's candy for the eyes. And if you're a fan of, I'm going to guess if you're a fan of horror, there's like a 50% chance that you might have like a fandom in obscure music too, just because I feel like those clicks kind of run together to some extent. You're going to see a lot of familiar things in here. You're going to, again, the Galleria is it's practically its own character at this point, that mall. There's just a lot of eye candy here. And there's a lot of things that, although this is not good, if you're comparing this to like Dawn of the Dead or whatever, no, it's not good like that, but it's good in the sense that it's fun. You're going to want to go back to it. You're going to want to put it on with a bunch of friends and be like, look at this piece of shit. This is the definitive type of movie you want to grab like a case of beer, hang out and get like high and drunk and just watch stupid shit and have fun with. And I'm all here for that. So I feel pretty good about my 7.5 out of 10.
Candy for the eyes, candy for the soul. Hey, come here and look at this piece of shit. I like that. That's a good.
You know what though?
Summary.
Isn't that how we judge things?
It should be
more often than not.
I call my kids in sometimes the bathroom. Hey, kids, look at this piece of shit.
See, I'm glad I'm not your kid now.
Hey, family, all gather around. Look at this piece of shit. Before I start my hot dog spiel.
Hey, family, look at this piece of shit.
Everybody,
that right there.
Get the family. It's Christmas time. Look at this piece of shit.
Get your phones, kid. We got to take pictures.
Video. Watch it go down.
Oh, video.
Yeah,
sure.
Got to share this with future generations. And this needs to be chronicled. Are you surprised that there were no sequels to this movie with the way that it ended?
Moderately. And my only assumption is that it probably comes down to money. Not so much. I don't think this movie would have made a ton of money, period. But I would assume that this guy, whoever bankrolled this movie, my guess would be they probably took a pretty massive L. And there was probably some sort of rights issue. If I had to guess, someone owned the rights to Phantom of the Mall. And because they took a massive L, they were probably like, fuck you, I'm not doing that again. So that'd be my guess. But yeah, I'm moderately surprised, but only moderately because, again, I feel like this is one of those movies that had a little bit of money behind it and that money didn't come back. And that's kind of what killed it.
Side note, before I get into my hot dogs, Troy Donahue sold the rights to his likeness in the 70s for $5.86. All right. I just found that very humorous, and I talked about him much earlier in this episode. Anyways, for me, I feel like this is the perfect movie to kick off our second annual Crummy Movie Marchathon, Crummy Movie March, whatever, Crummy Movie-a-thon, whatever the hell I called it earlier. The critics were not kind to this movie, and this movie is really fucking stupid, but it's fun as hell. The deaths are pointless, the story is stupid, the characters are dumber, but sometimes that's what it takes to make a classic piece of shit like this. To quote the theme song, and this is not something I would ever say, but to quote the theme song, Eric is just a quote
from the Vandals.
Eric is just a quote retard in a broken hockey mask, end quote. Melody honestly fucks him over because he's gross.
In fairness to the Vandals, they've apologized for using that.
They should. but I needed to quote them because the theme song.
Yeah,
it's in the theme
but this
song.
also came out in 89. And
Yeah.
for,
Am I
for
cutting
better
this
or
out
worse,
of my
obviously
part,
for worse.
John?
No, this is fine.
All right. You're my barometer.
For better
for
or
PC.
worse, that word was somehow acceptable in 1989. And it's not now. Continue.
Melody fucks him over because he's gross. Not his fault. He's just gross. He's gross. Okay. He's gross. There's worse things to be.
It is his fault.
I got to give this movie 7 dick biting toilet cobras out of 11 hot dogs. If you listen to this theme song, it'll tell you the whole story. That's what's great about it.
I have a feeling it's going to be played at the end of this episode.
I think you might be right.
If it's not, I'm going to be disappointed. I'm not in charge of that though. So
If only we knew a guy.
I like how somehow we ended up pretty close, the same like feeling on, or rating on this movie, even though we went to it from totally different angles.
Yeah.
So
It's just fun. Like you said, I mean, it's stupid fun.
well, yeah. And that's the best kind of fun. It's stupid because duh. So after we talk about a movie, whether we do it well or not, we talk about a question of the week. We ask questions. We want you to answer them. And this week, our question of the week is apparently confusing. In honor of Crummy Movie March, what is your favorite B movie genre? Action, sci-fi, horror, martial arts, etc., or other? Let's start on...
Was this really that hard?
Yes.
I guess we'll find out.
You'll see
All right.
why. So we're going to start on Facebook. I usually throw it to Sean for an answer, but we're going to start on Facebook. And on Facebook, Devin responded to this. If you want to hang out with Devin, you can go to Arctic Circle Brewing in Chesterfield,
Mhm.
right? Chesterfield. So go out there, have a beer with them. They have great beer. That's an awesome spot. Go over to Sean's Draft Therapy channel and watch the video we did at Arctic Circle. It's good. Devin says, you got to love B budget horror movies. And I totally agree with him. So yeah, go to Arctic Circle. Stop listening to us. Go there.
And tell them that you
Want to go to Instagram or
so that you just don't go there
Yeah,
and show
even
up. I
better.
mean, you can just go there and show up. That's fine too. But, let them know.
Sean, what's next? Instagram or Twitter?
Let me flip my coin here. Instagram.
Okay. So over on Instagram, we're going to start with our good friend Jordana. She's at Pretty Killer Podcast. She's also at Core Forward Podcast and Feature Creatures DTF. She's all over the fucking place. So follow her and make sure you stay up to date on all her
Stuff.
shit. Jordana said Intruder, Chopping Mall, Slumber Party Massacres. So what I'm taking from that is Jordana wants more Crummy Movie March horror movies.
Yeah, those are all horror, according to my estimation.
Those are all
Mhm.
horror. But I like all those movies. So Jordana, I actually talked to you about this earlier today, but I'm going to say go back at the beginning of this episode, listen to what we said about Hard to Die. You'll have fun. Slumber Party Massacre, Driller Killer, boobs, all that stuff. Our friend Rory Rice. Rory, I'm glad you're feeling better. I've been following you on the socials, so I'm glad you're feeling better and doing well. He says horror, flat out, straight to the point. This man knows what he wants, and he's not fucking wrong. On Instagram, at 321 Ghost Pod says horror comedy. Totally agree, and I kind of feel like most of the stuff that we're going to talk about this month that falls in horror also falls in comedy, including this movie, because to me, horror comedy is almost like an unintentional genre. There's movies like Return of the Living Dead and Shaun of the Dead that can be intentionally funny. I didn't mean to use 2 zombie movies, but whatever. But I think a horror comedy, like in its truest form, is movies like this, where it's, I don't know that they were going for comedy, but they got it.
Yeah, it gets to be so schlocky, maybe, that it just ends up being comedy, like unintentional comedy. And I think some of those are the best. Those are the ones that I remember the best.
Well, and one of our comments will kind of play on this, probably the next comment that we'll read, but those schlocky, almost shitty like effects, although they can be bad in their own way, like bad as a broad term, they can be great because they're almost, you hear all the time, like, is this movie bad or so bad that it's good? I feel like effects have this really like sweet spot where they can easily go from like bad,
Hilarious.
but it turns around
Yeah.
to being good because it's a practical effect. Where it becomes bad and just bad is when it's just bad CGI.
And that can be funny too. I think there's room for it across the board. But yeah, it's like this.
It can
Fine
be,
line.
but it doesn't feel as timeless, at least right now. So here's the weird thing about CGI, like bad but good. CGI bad but good feels like when it hits, and I say this somewhat lovingly, when it hits N64 area where it's like bad but good because it's like in the infancy. I almost said infidel. When it's in the infancy of its technological advance, I guess, whatever. When it's not quite there yet, but they're trying to make it work anyway. That's when bad CGI
Yes.
is good.
I agree. I knew what you meant.
Yeah, well, it's going to sound really bad when you edit this, so that's fine. So that's your problem. All right, so that's all we had on Instagram. We didn't have anything on Threads today. Come on, Threads, pick your shit up. Going over to Twitter, and we're going to start with Pearl because she quote tweeted us, so we're going to take that so I can find it. And Pearl says, you follow her at HissyFaceX. She says, 80s and 90s B horror. Who says no to shitty practical effects with blood? There's a typo here, but I'm going to read it anyway. Blood, puss, and explosion. I think she meant to say pus.
Hey, could go either way.
Our friends over at Damn Podcast, Pot of the Dam, said grindhouse exploitation flicks. Handy, especially for the gore. I gotta say, I totally agree with this. It is really hard to find a good, fun exploitation flick that doesn't feel like some sort of like murder porn or like shit or just total shit. I think with Crummy Movie March, we both agree that there's kind of a fine line between just total shit and like what we're looking for. And I think they're getting at what we're looking for with this. Fair?
Yeah, I feel like inherently exploitation, blaxploitation, grindhouse movies can fill that void, because a lot of these movies are not great movies, but they're fun. And I feel like a lot of those low budget movies,
Exactly.
they're doing a lot with a little. And I feel like that those kind of subgenres fit the mold exactly.
Totally agree. So our buddies over at Dissect That Film said, I love a good B-horror creature feature. I love it when the questionable quality of the creatures attack. Agreed. As mentioned earlier, our friends and fellow You Run Podcast Network compadres, the Krusty Boys at the Krusty Boys, said, it's got to be the Toxic Avenger. It's so bad, amazing, and also normalizing jump roping with intestines. God, I can't talk. I almost feel like trauma should be its own subgenre.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
like
When
trauma,
you say trauma
is almost,
you know what you're getting. There's like a mark of quality.
well, and Toxie is all trauma too. I don't know what the new one is, but the one that is that this year or next year?
I think it's
The
this year.
reboot or whatever.
I think so.
We should probably cover that, but
We will.
I really feel like trauma is almost its own subgenre within a genre, and I feel like it has been for as long as I can remember. So Lloyd, if you're listening, you've replied to us. We've carried on your attack against Delta Airlines. Was it Delta? I think.
I don't know. Sure.
Lloyd, please add us again. We'll retreat whatever you're pissed off at. And then last, certainly not least, at Dr. Snake says, Body Hoyer. That's a quarterback. That is not what I said. So at Body Snakes says body horror and SOV shot on video. So I would say between the two of us, you're the shot on video guy more than I am.
Yeah. No, those are valid too. Those, I mean, we watched.
Well, they're certainly
Hellspa.
valid.
Yeah. I mean, Hellspa that's a shot on video.
We did Hellspa. There's the aforementioned Black Devil Doll from drinking game. That's 2 this episode. Is that the official Dewey Pod Monster drinking game? Is every time Black Devil Doll from Hell comes up, you take a drink?
It has to be like a big drink, because we mention it, but we only do it sparingly. Like we'll do it once an episode or once every 3 episodes or whatever. So if you're trying to like become sober, that would be a good drinking game. But I think you'd got to drink a lot.
Unless you want to listen to that episode, then you might get alcohol poisoning.
I think it's got to be a large quantity if that's going to be the drinking game.
Okay. So that's all we had. So Sean, do you have an answer to the question of the week?
Not really. I feel like when you see it, like I like all of them. I don't have like a preference. I like the whole, I feel like you get more of these kind of crummy movies in the horror genre. I feel like it's much more of a ripe kind of fruit to pick. More of low-hanging fruit, I guess, is in the horror genre. But I can see, and maybe sci-fi is one that's probably a little less. But horror is definitely a big one. Action, there's so many. I mean, you could argue that 90% of Chuck Norris's catalog are Crummy Movie March kind of material. And especially when they go off the rails, like something like Silent Rage or Invasion USA, where it's just over the top ridiculous, where they're just so far-fetched that, Invasion USA is practically The Purge, for fuck's sake. So I like all those types of movies, and it's one of those things where when you know it when you see it.
So as a Tubi aficionado, I'd say Crummy Movie Horror is alive and well. So I like that though. So I'm not complaining about it. And I do want to see more of it. But if you had asked me this morning when I said to you, pick a question of the week because I'm an idiot and I can't think right now. I didn't have an answer then. Now I would really like to say exploitation flick because I don't think it's a secret. I'm a big fan of movies like Machete. I'm a big fan of the Grindhouse series. Planet Terror is one of my top whatever. I'm not going to try to put a number on it. My biggest gripe about the movie Thanksgiving, which will be an episode in November, is that, so brace yourself for November. Take a drink if you listen to this episode and then hear it then. My biggest gripe about that movie is it doesn't have the Grindhouse feel that the other movies that came out of the original for that series. It doesn't have that. I'd like to see more exploitation that's done in a way that's fun and over the top. And again, really to me, the prime meridian in this is going to be Machete. I want more movies like that where it's just, is it horror? Not necessarily. Is it action? Kind of, sort of, but is it just ridiculous and gratuitous on every level? Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see more movies in that vein. And I think one of the biggest travesties in, the current movie landscape out there is we don't have stupid action movies anymore. We don't have these one-off like Commando or Running Man or what. Everything's got to be a franchise or, sequelable or Disney. I would love to see more of these movies that are just these, we're going to have fun for an hour and a half. Last week's episode, 2 weeks ago's episode, Action Jackson is a perfect example of that. Could this have been a franchise? Yes. Does it work great as a single individual piece of action exploitation flick? Absolutely. I would like to see more of that type of shit where we can just get back to like, whether you go to the theater or you watch it at home, either way, I just want to go for an hour and a half, have some fun, and then go about my day. And that's where so much of this good stuff lies. And that's what makes Crummy Movie March and Crummy Movies fun, is you're just going in and having fun for an hour and a half. And I'd like to get back to more.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of this stuff now is just exploitation specifically is just cruel. It's not fun.
Yeah.
And let's get back to the fun.
Hostile, but worse. So yeah, not to be a bummer at the end of the show, but I fit that mold anyway. So, anything else you want to add before we wrap up on this? I feel like we're running long. We've been going for a while.
We are running very long, but I just wanted to add that Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge is available on some streaming networks. You will probably, if you're not a subscriber to something like AMC Plus or, other things, Shudder, Arrow, whatever the fuck Arrow is, you're going to be paying a couple bucks to see it. But I think it's if you got a couple bucks to spare in an hour and a half, this is a really fun movie to watch.
Totally agree. So we're going to wrap up. If you're in Michigan, come hang out with us at Batch. We're going to be at Batch around St. Patrick's Day. I want to say it's right before. I don't have it in front of me right now, but come hang out with us and we're going to watch Leprechaun. Follow us on social media. We are posting that information. You can follow us at Dewey Pod Monster. This month's movie is Leprechaun. Like I said, it's Irish as fuck. All the social medias, we are at Dewey Pod Monster. You can follow our old episodes or go back to our old episodes at crap.town, which is our site. That is actually our site. You can find us on all the podcast platforms and of course at yourunpodcast.com. Sean, please fix whatever I just said, because I'm sure I fucked up a bunch of times. Make it right. I've been drinking.
Okay, well, I was going to add that if you want your answer answered during the question of the week segment of this show, you got to go on social media. You got to answer it to find out when that date is, because we don't know when the hell it is for Leprechaun. Follow us on social media at Dewey Pod Monster. Also wanted to give a big thanks to everybody that's still answering the poll, giving us feedback on Spotify. If you could rate the podcast, if you could subscribe, do whatever the hell you're supposed to do with all that stuff. It helps us out somehow. Supposedly it gets in front of more people. Share it with people if you know they love Crummy movies, because we talk about them more than just March, but specifically in March. And if you want to follow me or any of my craft beer adventures, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com, or you can also find me on the social media at Draft Therapy.
We talked about Cobweb and It's a Wonderful Knife, and both those movies fucking suck. That wasn't anywhere close to fucking March.
That's true. Those are the new, well, I don't even know if I'd consider those crummy. They're just shit.
They're crummy, but not in the way that we want to talk about. We do that as a service for you. So listen to us. Yeah, don't listen to us. Anyway, we'll be back next week with some other shit. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good week.
The laws Americanized soul.
But it's been good enough for me. Don't need no frozen yogurt. Don't want no GHQ. Just want a chance to grow up in the same town where I met you. Is there a panel in the mall?
still like, who the fuck is Eric? Fuck Eric.
Yeah. Well, you know who Eric is now.
I know, but that's still my initial response to the title of this movie is, who the fuck is Eric? Fuck Eric.
And why do I care about his revenge?